when we first opened, but I actually got into roasting, and so now I'm roasting all the coffee we serve and sell as well on Alio Bullet
Jeff,
machine.
I have to interrupt you for a second. I did something and it kicked me out right when we started. And so we'll start with your introduction again. I kept trying to find the
Yeah,
podcast. I couldn't find it anywhere. Folks, if you're watching Third Day Coffee, I apologize. I don't know what happened. It kicked me out as soon as I hit broadcast. And so, anyway, you'll see a screen on the bottom with all the sponsors of the show. And I apologize. We got to back up a little bit. Um, so I'll have to hear that twice, but it's all good. And and then now I can get everything set up the way it's supposed to be set up. So if you would please just introduce yourself, and we'll start from there.
yeah. So I'm Jeff Jones, and I have a coffee shop in a tourist town in the Dominican Republic called Las Terrenas. We just opened last November, and it was a pretty unexpected life turn. I'm a physician in emergency medicine. My wife's a physician in pediatrics, but we found this incredible tourist town in the DR and decided to get a place for vacation and eventually retirement, and then kind of accelerated the plan and just brought the whole family there. Although I've still been coming back to the U.S. to work in the emergency department. But in order to get our residency visa through the investment visa process there, we decided to start a business and saw that specialty coffee shop was a big need there. People asked about it, looked for it, and all the coffee was the same Santo Domingo Coffee Company pods with machines that they supply, and just not great at all. Um, Even though there's lots of French people, Italian people, people from all over there, there wasn't great coffee. And so we started remodeling the storefront and accumulating machines, and then during also get into roasting. And I'm now roasting all the coffee we're using on a 1 kilogram Alio Bullet machine. We've been open since November, and it's been a lot of fun.
That's I know personally that that's kind of a big jump to go from just making coffee um, to to the point where you are just going to decide that you're going to roast. You know,
Yeah.
um, I we went on a trip overseas, and I had real coffee for the first time as a 40-something-year-old man. Um, Never experienced coffee like that before, and came home and wanted to do it. And then we went overseas the second time, and a couple of years later, and I just like, this is what I'm going to do. And I had no clue how to do it. I bought a rotisserie from Amazon, like a meat skewer with a little
Mm-hmm.
cage, and it
Mm-hmm.
did 4 ounces of coffee, and I
Oh,
that's how
wow.
I started roasting.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, but that's pretty amazing, especially like I'm not really familiar with Dominican Republic. So, what is the big pull that there's so many different nationalities down there?
Um, this was a surprise to us, but when we visited this place that my wife found on HGTV, it's on a lot of these shows on TV. We just found that people from Spain and Italy had found this area decades ago. And there's also a lot of Canadians because the airport nearby has direct flights from Canada, but not from the US. So there's a whole bunch of people from Europe and Canada, and it's not been as discovered by Americans as someplace like Punta Cana, also in the DR. So it's just a whole bunch of expatriates from all over there. It's pretty neat place.
That's New Zealand's kind of like that. There's a lot of um, retired military and law enforcement from
Mm,
the UK, Scotland, Australia,
mm,
and and the United States. It's just weird, you
yeah.
know. I mean, it's a beautiful place. It's absolutely gorgeous. My daughter lives there, and so and does my grandson. So that was kind of how we got into the coffee in the first place.
Hmm.
But
Hmm. Yeah.
When you decided that you were going to do a coffee shop, where were you sourcing your coffee from?
Um, so that evolved too. When I was planning to just buy it, not roast it, I found a supplier in the Dominican Republic. He actually has a pretty cool app, and you can order coffee from like 8 different single origins around the island. And he actually has a training for baristas. He runs this coffee school in Santo Domingo. So we got connected with him and thought we'd get the coffee from him. But then when I started roasting, that kind of changed the plan. And so we visited a coffee factory and plantation in the part of the island that has the best beans. It's the highest part of the island. It's actually the highest, and Pico Duarte is the mountain. And so now I just via WhatsApp place an order for this amazing coffee, washed, honey processed, natural, whatever I want. But for my espresso, I'm also mixing it with Brazilian and Ethiopian. So I use mainly Dominican due to the cost is so low for me. But I mix it with some Brazilian and Ethiopian to get the taste I want just for the espresso. For the cold brew, drip, everything else, we mainly use this Dominican or a blend of a couple of the different Dominican beans.
And when you say espresso, you're taking an Arabica coffee and you're roasting it to Italian.
Not quite to Italian. On my bullet, it's in centigrade. I go to um, more like full city to about 224 degrees. So not as dark, but for the espresso, I'm using about 50% honey processed Dominican, about 30%, 35% Brazil, and the rest Ethiopia.
Wow,
15%.
that's cool. For the espresso that I sell, I use Robusta,
Uh huh.
and I get it from Guatemala. Well, usually right now, I can't even I can't even get a bag. I think Ashley's trying to find me some Robusta right now. Um, but and I roast it almost to Italian. I roast it to about
Okay.
440 degrees.
Okay.
Second crack, right at past second
Yeah.
crack.
I want to include some Robusta, but I haven't yet found any in the DR. I could, of course, order it and carry it from the US, but it gets difficult. So I'd like to find some Robusta to include in the blend, maybe 10 or 15%, but I haven't yet found it.
Is there like do they have Amazon and everything there, or everything has to come on a boat?
Yeah, pretty much everything has to come by boat. And so most of us have a freight forwarder, a couple different offices in town. You can order things to an address they have in Miami, and it comes from that box in Miami. So you use your Miami address with Amazon, and then they get it to you, but it's not cheap. It's they charge you by the weight, and there's a big tax if it's anything valued over $100. So it's if it comes from outside the island, it's going to be expensive.
Wow, that's kind of how Ashley is with Honda. Like I can't send him anything when he's down there because they
Yeah,
don't have anything out in the mountains where they're at.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just such a remote area. Um, and so, um, I guess talk a little bit about how the business kind of because you said that that wasn't really part of your game plan when you moved down there,
Right.
um, and you did notice some things, but it's not as easy as just noticing a need, right? Because
Yeah.
you can notice a need, you know, a desire for people, like they call them pain points, right? You can find a pain
Mm,
point, but that doesn't mean you're just going to decide, hey, I'm going to fill that pain point, you know. And so, how did that, you know, how did that
yeah.
happen?
So it actually morphed quite a bit. We have a big family, 5 kids and 2 adults, and one of our closest friends in the DR when we first moved there was a taxi driver, And he kind of said, "Hey, if you get a van, like a 10-passenger van, you can fit your family. When you come to and from the airport, I can go pick you up, and you can kind of use it as a business because there's a lot of tours there. There's waterfalls and whales and four-wheeler tours and all sorts of tours. And then there's, of course, a lot of tourists coming to and from the airports, and typically they don't have transportation. So we first started a business called Toby's Tours, named after my oldest son, Toby, and had the logo on our van and everything. And then we thought we would be like the English speaking tour business because there's French and there's Spanish and there's lots of tour businesses, but there wasn't really an English speaking one. And we did a little bit of that. And that's why we first started looking for a storefront for the tour business. But then after we found the space, we thought we'd include coffee. And then I got really into the coffee and really learned everything about the coffee. And it's not a huge store. And so I really needed all the space for the coffee. And we kind of dropped the tours completely. And so we named this business after our daughter, Jocelyn Jones. We call her JoJo. So it's JoJo's Java House.
That's pretty cool. Um, I still can't really wrap my head around, you know, all the different nationalities that are down there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tiny, right? Like it's that big. It's just half of the island, right?
Uh, yeah. We're on this peninsula in the northeast, the Samana Peninsula. And it's yeah, like I said before, it's just not well known yet to Americans, but a ton of Dominicans come to where we're at for vacation. During this week, they all have off called Semana Santa. It's just overrun, and there are a ton of Canadians that come. A lot of my customers in the coffee shop are Canadians, but and more Americans. I know several who are buying pre-construction places there right now, but I think we all think it's gonna. For we're both hopeful for business purposes and fearful for infrastructure and crowds, but we think it's really going to explode at some point because it's beautiful. It's the water's unlike anything anywhere almost.
Well, and just from a coffee standpoint, you're doing specialty coffee, which is not
Hmm.
regular coffee. I feel like every time I talk about coffee, I know Ashley does too. Ashley comes on the show a lot, or I go on his, and we feel like we always have to tell people what it is because they don't know.
Yeah.
And you have all these big companies, and I'm not going to name them because I'll get sued right in like 2 seconds. But all these big companies in the United States that sell gourmet coffee, premium coffee, small batch, they call it all kinds of stuff. But if it
Hmm.
doesn't have paperwork, proving a cupping score of 80 or better, it's just coffee.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
what are some
Yeah.
of
The
the
coffee.
obstacles that you have to deal with?
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's one good thing about the Dominican Republic is, on some of these forums, like where I ran into your post, people are talking about all the restrictions. They have to get all these approvals to roast coffee and all these, certifications and inspections for a coffee shop. It's a little bit more lax in the Dominican Republic. Um, you can pretty much do whatever you want. If you want to, if someone wanted to sell alcohol, they just buy the alcohol and sell the alcohol, for example. So it's quite a bit easier. We did get a health inspection, sort of a food service inspection, and our employees have to take a little test, but it's pretty easy to do business there without a lot of red tape.
Well, that's encouraging, and I assume, and I don't like to assume, but uh, somebody told me one time that assumption is the lowest form of human knowledge.
Yeah.
But I assume that it's not very expensive to live there.
Yeah, several years ago, that was a big draw. It's lower cost of living. Um, but it's gone up quite a bit with inflation the past few years and the fact that everything needs imported. So construction prices and the price of goods, a lot of that's gone up a lot. There's no cars made on the island, so they're actually more expensive than here. But labor is still affordable. So it's if you can, yeah, if if you have someone who cleans your house or works in a coffee shop, some of that can definitely be cheaper.
That's
But on the
great.
flip side, the salaries are low, and so people, if they're not retired and they want to move there, that you pretty much need to count on remote work because it's hard to get a work visa to work there legally, and even if you did, the salaries are pretty low. So that's some of the trade-offs.
Even for like physicians, it's hard to get work there.
Yeah, actually, you have to have someone sponsor you, and the pay would be pretty low, and so it'd probably be better to do telemedicine or come back here at times or something.
Wow, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And so, where do you see, like, what is the progression for your business at this point?
Yeah, so currently I'm using this small roaster, and we're only selling the beans in our coffee shop. And we we opened thinking we would mainly just kind of do. I was all about the coffee. All the other food was just an afterthought. But for the customers, they want food. It's interesting that they don't typically want takeout to go. They're on vacation, and we have this beautiful plaza. We have a front door on the main street and a back door in this beautiful plaza, and we have air conditioning, which is a big draw too. So people typically, yeah, we don't we do some to go cups, especially for cold drinks and smoothies, but a lot of our consumption is there, and we do a lot of breakfast, and so that's been a big part of the business, and even sandwiches. So one next step will be to expand the food a little bit. I'd like to kind of do start smoking meat. We talked a little bit about this before. There's no smoked meat culture there, so I'd love to have like all day breakfast tacos and regular tacos with eggs and bacon and sausage and pulled pork and brisket and stuff like that. Some of that we have, but the smoked meats would be an addition. And then I'd like to have additional locations. Kind of already targeted a possible second city, and if we have second location or two, and maybe a restaurant with coffee as opposed to coffee with food, we kind of thinking about a restaurant, a smokehouse, basically. And if we distribute the coffee, all that would help me to make the leap to a bigger roaster.
Yeah, that's it's definitely a progression. We started out with 4 ounces, and then we went to a friend of mine welded a stainless drum that I set up on my big smoker offset smoker pit
Yeah.
um, that did 8 pounds,
Okay.
and then I bought a commercial roaster that had a built-in firebox. They custom built it for me, um, and so it's definitely a progression, to try to go from. I mean, literally started with a desktop electric countertop electric roaster.
Air roaster, you said. Yeah.
Yeah, and so a lady at church gave me let me borrow their roaster, and I thought it was going to smell amazing. And people when people come to my shop, the shop smells great, but
Hmm.
that's because everything goes all the way past the roasting part, and until it gets to the very end, it doesn't smell very good,
Mm,
and so I think that's always a misconception, and it's just funny that people,
yeah.
oh, I bet it smells amazing. Well, yeah, when I'm done with it, it smells amazing, but getting through
Yeah.
that,
Yeah. I think the grinding of the coffee smells even better. But
yes,
but our roaster, we have a PVC, big, well, not a PVC, a big a duct vent that goes out right over the roaster, out the front door onto the main street, and people can definitely smell the coffee roasting as they drive by.
That's yeah, it's always something that when I look at retail, um, I've even thought about taking a cast iron skillet and just taking some beans that I don't care if I burn and just cooking them over a cast iron skillet at a live event.
Mm.
And so what if they burn? People are going to smell them,
Yeah, yeah,
and it does something. You're like, oh, what is that? It's
yeah.
so.
So you're supposed to be the one asking the questions, but I do have one. How does the roasting with wood work? Like, what kind of time does that require, and how many sticks are you looking at, and how do you control the fire? And
So the unit that I bought is a commercial roaster from U.S. Roasters out of Oklahoma, and it has a propane burner in it, just like most of your common commercial
okay,
roasters, Probats, and whatever. Same concept. It's got the drum. It's got the burner down below. Well, what they did when they built mine, they dropped the burner a little bit lower, and they put a small box uh, in between the drum and the burner.
yeah,
And so when I put the wood in there, it's not really the wood that's getting the beans to temperature, it's the propane that's doing it. But
okay,
while it's doing that, it's it's just like an offset smoker,
yeah,
smoker pit. Being from Alabama, I'm sure you're familiar with that.
yeah,
And so um, that wood gets smoked into the coffee,
okay, okay.
and
So
it's
you
not
still can control
overpowering.
the, yeah,
Yeah.
you can still control it with the gas burner, but the smoke, the
Yes.
wood adds to it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and so it's got two. My unit has two probes. One is in the exit air that goes through the drum, and the other one is in the bean stream. To
Yep,
read the temp on the beans. And so,
yep,
no matter what, and I've learned because initially I was like, I'm gonna throw a big old log in there because I got a lot of coffee to roast. Not the thing to do because what happens, it'll catch on fire, and you'll see the temperatures
mm,
spike, and then you get a little bit uneven coffee. And
mm,
so I've learned to make small little pieces of wood that are about 10 inches long. Um,
okay,
and, I've learned to moderate that a little bit, whereas when I first started, I was getting a lot of uneven roast. Ashley actually figured out what I was doing wrong. And I don't know how,
okay,
because he's never seen he saw it when I had it in the trailer when I picked it up. But, he really helped me get my roast down. He's very knowledgeable about the roast process, not just growing coffee.
hmm,
But one of the advantages that you have, I think, is you have coffee on the island,
yeah,
and it's good
yeah.
coffee.
If you look at, I know Coffee Bean Corral, certain places sell the coffee from the same place I get it. It's called Ramirez Brothers, the washed honey, red honey, etc. And to buy beans is like $8 a pound here in the U.S. and get it for like $3 a pound.
Wow.
Yeah, and it is really good coffee. So yeah, and it's really easy for me to get. I just send a WhatsApp and they deliver it to the coffee shop in a few days
And
through a
how many
courier.
different farms did you say that there? I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah,
coffee
yeah. There's a
farms.
lot of there's a lot of coffee grown in the Dominican Republic, and quite a bit grown in Haiti as well on the other side of the island. But there's not a lot of export because Dominicans drink a lot of coffee. It's just that they drink it from the same big company that mixes it with probably things other than coffee and sells it in these pods that are roasted who knows when. And it's not the worst thing ever, but it's not great. Yeah.
That was another question that I wanted to ask you. Is like, going into a culture that you're not native from,
Mm.
how have they received you in that community?
Yeah, it's interesting the challenges because I've never been in business. I've just kind of worked for someone as a physician my whole life, never not private practice or anything on my own. So there's that challenge, but then there's the language barrier as well. Um, Fortunately, we have a bilingual lawyer, accountant who's really helpful, and we've learned a lot of Spanish because we have 5 employees and none of them speak English at all. And so to communicate with them and instruct them, I use a lot of Google Translate in our WhatsApp group. Yeah. But
Yeah, that
yeah,
works.
lot to learn about their employment laws, when they need to be off, when they expect to get paid, certain expectations they have. Like here, you don't typically provide your employee with lunch, but there, that's kind of a standard. Is you either provide them with lunch or give them some money to get lunch.
Wow, that's interesting because I know when we went to Honduras, um, that culture is. Um, I'd never been, even when I was in the military, I'd never been to a third world country. Never
Mm-hmm.
seen it. I mean, I'd been to Mexico when I was a kid, but my dad and mom knew where to go, and
Mm-hmm.
so we were always in nice places. And I had never in my mind, in my 50-year-old mind, I never thought that I would ever see a place where they had a hole in the ground
Mm,
for their toilet, where they
yeah,
didn't have running water, where some of them
yeah,
didn't have electricity.
yeah.
Um, and Ashley really had to um, he had to learn that too. He had to work with um, the women don't have rights down there
Mm,
like they do in other
mm,
places,
mm.
and so he had to negotiate with the husbands. Yeah, hey, want to employ your wife,
Wow.
and the husband decides what she's going to get paid and all that other stuff. And
Oh,
so
wow. Wow.
it was I can't imagine. They went down as missionaries
Mm-hmm.
um, to the region, and so I guess that was another question I wanted to ask you. Like, the first time you went down to the Dominican Republic, was it just vacation? You just saw something online and y'all wanted to
Yeah.
go check it out?
Yeah. So my wife and I had gone to Punta Cana once to an all-inclusive resort, and Punta Cana is totally different. It's all resorts, wall-to-wall resorts, all along the beach. You can't even get to the beach unless you go through a resort. And this area that she found is totally different. And we kind of been looking for some place maybe to invest in for like a retirement place. We looked at the Bahamas and Florida, and we read about Costa Rica. And then she found this area, and we went for vacation. And she talked me into meeting with the realtor. And before I knew it, we were investing, and again, before I knew it, we decided to accelerate the plan and move there. So yeah, she found it through TV shows and reading about books about the area.
That's pretty awesome because I know that, I mean, I would, if I had unlimited resources, I would be in New Zealand for 6 months out of the year with my grandson and my daughter.
Yeah,
And then I would do 3 months down in Honduras every year during harvest.
yeah,
And then, I love my beloved Texas. So I could never completely stray away. And
yeah.
everything you hear about us is probably true. So,
Well, that reminds me of a lot of our customers. The Canadians have to be in Canada for at least 6 months out of the year to maintain their health insurance. And
oh,
Canada's really, really strict. I don't know if you remember their COVID protocols and COVID hotels, and they're really, really gotten to be a pretty strict country. And so they know. And if you're not in the country for at least 6 months, you lose your health insurance. And so a lot of people come down and live in the DR from Canada for the winter. So say November through May, and they make sure that they're back in Canada for at least 6 months.
so the Dominican Republic, that government, is it like a socialist government also?
No, it's actually democratic. Yeah, but they're very open to outside investment, and they if you want to buy a house or start a business, you can do it. They don't have a lot of restrictions on outside ownership.
That's nice because I mean it helps them,
Yeah,
you know, and so if it brings revenue to the island, it's definitely helping somehow.
right, right.
But, what other kind of obstacles do you face down there? You know, as being an outsider running a business.
Yeah, I think that I think a big one is sourcing and finding stuff because um, a lot of places don't have websites there, and there's not a lot of stuff outside the capital, Santo Domingo, and some of the bigger cities. And so it can be kind of hard to find stuff. Facebook is an option, but when your Spanish isn't perfect and websites are limited, it can be hard to find what you need. For example, equipment for the coffee shop, or if we start a restaurant. So some of that's a challenge, and the language barrier is probably the biggest thing that creates issues. Our Spanish is pretty good, but it's still really helpful to have a local to help you with many things.
It's different because I served in the Navy with a Dominican national, and the Spanish that I grew up with and the Spanish that he speaks,
Yeah,
I don't care what anybody says, they're not the same.
no,
And
no, and it's fun, unfortunate for us, or maybe in the long run it'll help us. But if it's very fast in the DR, and they drop a lot of letters at the end of words, and so yeah, when we're around people speaking a lot of Spanish who are, say, from Spain or Mexico, or if we're in the Miami airport or whatever, it's like, wow, that's so much easier to understand. And so Dominican Spanish is tough.
yeah, even the Cubans who speak pretty fast
Uh-huh.
and loud, and the Puerto Ricans who speak really fast,
Yeah,
I can still track those conversations. But my buddy from the DR, I
uh,
had a very hard time.
yeah,
It was always, what? What did you say? And
yeah. They almost, the ones who are used to being around English speakers, they change the way they talk to you, and some are good at that, and some aren't. And so some of my employees who have worked in the restaurant industry a lot and been around a lot of Europeans and Americans, they can talk to me in a way I can understand, and I have other employees I can't understand at all. It's because they just talk so fast, and they don't have another gear to understand how to speak to someone.
yeah, I can tell that's going to be a pinch point for you guys, you know, to get past that. I know, you know, my uncle was the first Mexican American ever to get his doctorate degree in bilingual education,
Well,
and he still co-authors the textbook even though he's retired. And my Spanish is atrocious.
okay.
And so when I run into people from Laredo and they find out what my last name is, they're
Right.
like, "Oh, are you any relation to Dr. Alanis?" And I'm like, "Yeah, he's my uncle." And then they start like immediately they just switch to Spanish, and I'm like,
Mhm.
"Whoa, time out! My Spanish sucks." So and they look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just one of those things. But it was weird because we went to Honduras, and my wife wanted to give Ashley's number one. She's like she runs the farm. She does the
Hmm.
payroll. She does everything. She does all the import export paperwork for him. And anyway, Connie was Ashley was she was telling Ashley, and I don't know why I just started speaking to her in Spanish, and we got done, and she just wanted to give her this hair tie that was made with piano wire, and so I started just talking to her, and when we were done, we went to our apartment there, and my wife's like, I do believe that's the first time I've ever heard somebody speak in tongues, and I was laughing because I go. She goes, "Where did you get that from?" I said, "I really don't know.
Wow.
I guess all those years growing up listening to my
Yeah.
mom and dad,
Yeah,
some
it'd
of it
probably come
stuck."
back to you. It'd probably come back to you if you were really immersed. But
Yeah.
that reminds me of another big future aspect for us and pain point is um, I really like to be able to import coffee. I had some ties with some Colombians and different places, and it's kind of silly that it's going from Brazil or Colombia to the U.S. and then I'm carrying it in a suitcase. But you have to get a permit through the Department of Agriculture to import coffee, and it's a lot of paperwork. I kind of know where to start, but I kind of need to find a lawyer in the capital to help me, and so stuff like that. That would probably be doable on my own if I spoke good Spanish. It's just insurmountable without help. Yeah,
Yeah, I know that helpless feeling, and it's not so much that we're helpless; it's just that there's a barrier that is
yeah,
hard to cross.
yeah,
And I think you're probably in one of the toughest Spanish dialect countries
yeah,
that I've ever been around. I mean, the Castilians, it's a very proper and slow
hmm
Spanish,
hmm
and and so you can understand it, and the Puerto Ricans and Cubans, you just put that on fast forward a little bit, and you
yeah.
can still understand them. But it's like the Haitians too. They have their own, but I think theirs is like French or something too, isn't it?
Yeah, we actually have a lot of Haitians in our town, and and there's a woman who's been working for us since the day we moved there that we interviewed on Facebook uh, and met before we moved there. Um, she's Haitian. They have 5 kids as well, and her husband is kind of my evening manager. He's an electrician, but he needs a little more work, and then one of their daughters works there as well for me. So. Yeah, they speak Creole and French typically. Yeah.
Wow. So how far is Haiti from where you're at?
It's far from where we're at. We're in the northeast part of the island, and Haiti's the west side. So it would be like at least an 8-hour drive to Haiti.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I thought in my mind, you could cover that whole island in 8 hours.
Yeah. No, it's like 2 hours from where we're at to the south side of the island. So the north south isn't too far because that's where the capital is. But east west is farther.
Since you first moved down there, have you guys experienced any of the tropical weather and storms and things like that?
Yeah, we had one pretty good hurricane. This part of the island is relatively protected because it's just over a mountain range and it's on the north side, and all the hurricanes come from the southeast, typically south or east. But so this has been a really protected part of the island. That's part of why it's so beautiful. Is there's palm trees all the way up to the water still, as opposed to the southeast part of the island and the south part, there's no palm trees. It's just beach or rocky beach. But last man, when was that? We did have a hurricane go right over within the past 6 months, and it was inconvenient. It ended up being not too horrible in terms of property and life, but the power was out, and power means no fans or Wi-Fi or AC. So, and typically no running water without the power.
What's the infrastructure there like? Is there good infrastructure or not so much?
It needs a little help. There's a good toll road that connects the capital to where we're at. That was built 8 or 10 years ago, but the power goes out with some frequency, and it's going to be a popular enough town that they need more roads and more better water delivery and better power supply and better everything. So yeah, there's things that need help, but we were actually building a house there, and hopefully the house will have solar, so we can be independent. We'll have Starlink satellite. A lot of people are getting Starlink right now because it's crazy fast and affordable, and you're independent then of all the other providers. So yeah, hopefully in time we'll have Starlink and solar and be a little bit more independent of the downtime.
Yeah, that's got to be so as a business, I mean, have you been in a morning rush or whatever and lost power?
We have, and people there, they're not surprised, and so we still can serve cold brew and certain things, but it's happened. We've toyed. I almost bought a generator a couple weeks ago, and I probably still will, but it's so loud and our store is small that I'd probably have to keep it in our storage unit, and it'd be kind of a pain in the butt. Take 2 men to get it into our side by side and bring it from the storage unit. And usually the power comes back. You never know, but usually it comes back. So it happens. But people are laid back. They're always saying no hay problema. Um, um, what else do they say? Tranquilo. Probably that's the most common word that Dominicans use is tranquilo, tranquilo.
That's pretty awesome. I can't even imagine. Um, have you priced like having a shipping container sent there?
No, but if we get our residency, which we're almost done, I'm communicating with the consulate this week. I believe that if you once you do, you can bring one container tax free, because the taxes on everything are 18% for basically everything like that. But yeah, if we get the residency, then that would probably do that for stuff for our house and for uh, yeah, solar inverters and all sorts of stuff.
You could stick a Generac generator in there
Yeah,
as a backup for your
yeah,
store.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that's I know my daughter in New Zealand, her father-in-law comes to the states, occasionally. At least he's done 2 or 3 times since we've known him, and they send him and all his buddies. They all pitch in and they get a shipping container from New Zealand to L.A. or to South Carolina with their motorcycles and everything in it and their tools, and then they ride the motorcycles across the country
Wow.
on this. It's an off the highway trail that you pay money to
Wow.
get the ordinance, mostly private land.
Yeah.
Um, and then when they get to LA, they put everything back on a shipping container
Wow.
and then they fly home. And so I wonder if something like that, in the future, to move stuff down there. I mean,
Yeah. People do it. People definitely do it when they move. We didn't. We kind of shipped a bunch of boxes. We had like 18 suitcases between the seven of us. Um, but a lot of people do, especially when they move kind of permanently, start with the shipping container.
what ages are your children?
So the oldest will be 16 next month, and they're about every 2 years. So roughly 16, 14, 12, 10, 8.
Wow. So that's a very young family to just uproot and go.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And we've been going to international school there that has gone well, but I think we're going to homeschool for the first time starting in the fall. And so that'll give us more flexibility. We can be here in the States when we want to and not be tied to the school calendar, be there when we want to, and maybe even with our Spanish knowledge, go other places, Spain, Cuba, etc.
Yeah. I don't know if I mean my sister's best friend was in Cuba. She's in the Navy too, and she was down there, and she said aside from the absolutely amazing beaches and water, um, it's not all. what it's
Yeah.
cracked up to be. What
Yeah.
everybody thinks, and
Yeah.
and so there's definitely some other places that I would like to go, and
Hmm.
Spain's one. I haven't been there yet,
Yeah.
so we definitely want to do that. But when it comes to coffee, you're pretty much looking at the equator, and I would like to hit those countries,
Yeah.
before I decide to do something
Yeah.
different. Um,
Colombia is a very popular place to go from the DR. There's a lot of flights, and actually we have a lot of Colombian friends there in our town too, and they have some really amazing coffee around Medellin.
wow. So let me ask you this: with your business down there in your town, what's the ratio of local customers to foreign customers?
Yeah, so it's oh, I would say 80% foreign. Um,
Wow.
and by foreign, that's kind of a mixed bag. So there's your expat foreign like me, who lives there, and then there's your what do you want to call it? Your people who are working there for a while, but maybe moving on to different countries, remote workers from all over. There's a German guy who's in our shop every single day doing remote work, um, and um, and then there's tourists. So I guess those would probably be the three groups of foreigners: is expats, remote workers, and tourists. And that is most of our business. Um, and because there are locals who come, but a lot of times it's kind of price prohibitive for the typical Dominican. The exception is on weekends and holidays when there's a lot of tourists from Santo Domingo, the capital, and they typically have more money, and so we'll get more of them than we do the true locals.
What does a typical family of, say, four down there make annually?
Uh, I would say that a typical salary. I do know that a little better. A pretty typical salary would be like 300 a month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So not a ton. Yeah, $4
They don't have a lot of
coffee is
disposable
a lot.
income.
No, $4 coffee is a lot when you make 300 a month.
Yeah. Yeah. Honduras was like that too. There's a family of five, averages about $1,500 a year.
Wow.
And so one of the things that Ashley instituted when he started the farm was he wanted a way for them, for the locals, to be able to make more money than they were making. And if something happened to him, if he died, he always says that if I die tomorrow, Anna still knows how to export the coffee and get the
Mm-hmm.
prices up here
Mm-hmm.
because, a 150-pound bag up here is about $700.
Wow.
Well, down there, the big companies, big corporations go down there and they know they can't get the coffee out. They got no money to export it. And so they give them $20 for the same 150 pounds of coffee.
Wow. Wow.
And I had a hard time understanding that. And
Yeah.
so we made a deal with one of his employees, Jose Santos, and we're exclusively buying his coffee for the next 4 or 5 years.
Mm.
Um, and the money that we've been able to buy his coffee has changed his life. Like
Wow.
he's been able to build a house that doesn't slide off the side of the mountain
Yeah.
during the rainy season. Uh, they built a shower this last year, and they built uh, plumbing. Ashley's showing them how to make a basically a cesspool septic to get it out of the house,
Mm.
out of their mud huts.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's been it's been real eye opening for us, to go into a culture like that.
Yeah. Every step in the supply chain has big markups. So if you can go direct like that, that can help everybody.
So is there do you find situations where like they're like, oh, here comes the white guy, and then you got to pay more money for something?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. So there's situations where I'll send an employee, and there's other situations where the employee goes, "No, it's better for you to go." And so we were buying some bread from a bakery, and they realized he was buying it for a business, and they quit selling it to him. And so he's like, "You go, they'll let you have it." So yeah, there's definitely times where you don't want to get the gringo price, and so you want to get somebody local involved.
Yeah, I know that's difficult, and it doesn't really have to be white. It just un-American. You
Yeah,
know, if you're an American or a European, non-local, I
right.
could see where they would be, try to take advantage of that situation.
Yeah, little stuff like getting our van washed. It's better if I have my Dominican driver go than if I go.
That's insane. It's kind of hard to, but that's just I think one of the obstacles. Um, what is their, are they a very religious? I hate using that term because I don't like the word religion, but
Mhm.
are they a very faith-based culture?
I was surprised that they're not more so from what I expected and experienced in Central America as opposed to the Caribbean. And they have an amazing history. Like Columbus first went to the Dominican Republic, and his brother was the mayor of Santo Domingo. And they have like the first street in the New World, the first cathedral, the first monastery, the first convent, the first college. Really, really amazing history in Santo Domingo, a Catholic history. But there's still a lot of Catholic holidays. Semana Santa was the week I was referring to that everyone comes to our town, and a bunch of different Catholic holidays. But there's really not a lot of spirituality or church attendance, despite that historic and loose affiliation with the Catholic calendar. Not as much as I would have expected, anyway.
That's a really interesting aspect,
Yeah,
because I know, like, Mexico, and when we went to Honduras, and um,
yeah.
I have a friend that's from Colombia. She goes back and forth, and I know those are very, very faith-based
Hmm.
places. People are very, devout. Most of them are devout Catholics. I mean,
Right.
the Latino world is pretty much, Catholic, and so. But that's interesting that it's not as strong as what I mean. I would have
Yeah.
thought all those places, but I know the islands probably are very different too because I've been to St. Croix and Nassau and Puerto Rico,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and it's definitely a different culture, when you're on that island.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the food, like, I expected more Mexican influence on the food, but it's not at all. And they don't eat. They don't like. Typically, don't like spicy food. Don't eat a lot of spicy food. And there's really almost no similarity or influence of Mexican cuisine, for example, even though it's close.
That's crazy. So they got tortillas and everything, no?
No, no,
No?
no, they don't. I mean,
Wow.
yeah. And so in our town, there is a Mexican place, but no, typically they don't. Um, and we want to serve breakfast tacos made with corn tortillas, but no, typically I can't find corn flour. That's my biggest obstacle. Is they don't they don't use masa harina, and so yeah, they really don't. They did have them in the grocery store, but it's not a Dominican thing.
So I'm assuming the grocery store is probably pretty expensive. I know New Zealand, if it's not dairy or lamb, it's expensive.
Lamb, that's interesting. Yeah, it is a little bit like that. But one good thing about it is they have a nice app for delivery at the grocery store, the biggest grocery store in our town. And so our shop closed an hour ago, and the employees sent me a list of everything we need, and it's all saved in my favorites in the app. And so every single night, I just hit the things that we need for the next day, and they deliver it the next morning.
That's pretty awesome. And you were saying like you sell your coffee for $4 a cup, roughly.
No, we sell. It depends. A drip brew we sell for 90 pesos, which is under $2. Um, an espresso shot is about 90 pesos as well, under $2. So it depends. The like a latte, mocha, something like that. That's probably 200 pesos, about $4. Yeah.
Well, that's not
So
really so far removed from our, what,
yeah.
like I live in a small town. I say small town. It's about, I think we're about 40,000 people.
Hmm.
We're east of San Antonio. And so that's about what you would pay. And that's pretty amazing that you can sell. I mean, obviously 80% of your clientele is
Yeah.
not local. So,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
it's less than you would find at Starbucks or something, but but also more than there. If you go to a more local place there, an espresso might be 50 pesos or 70 pesos, and ours is 90.
it's funny because as much as I despise Starbucks and Dunkin', those two companies alone have single-handedly sparked the coffee revolution,
The third wave, I think they call it. Yeah.
and people don't want their coffee, which I think is ironic because they started it.
Yeah.
Um, people are looking for what you're doing, what we're doing, what Ashley's doing. They
Yeah.
want a small batch,
Yeah.
custom roasted coffee from someplace that doesn't come from a
Yeah.
big company.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the difference in my mind is how recently it was roasted and how recent, and making sure that you grind it fresh. I mean, I don't, maybe it's just me, but I don't know that there's typically incredible amounts of skill or talent or knowledge applied to roasting. I think it's more about how fresh it is and how good the beans are.
Yeah, it's ironic that you say that because that's the exact reason that I got into the coffee business.
Mm,
When we went to go meet my grandson in New Zealand when he was born, we were, $150 plane flight from where we were to Sydney for both
okay.
me and my wife. And so I told her, listen, that's on my bucket list. There's no way we're passing it up for $150 round trip.
Yeah.
So we went over there, and the morning that we got up to go walk around downtown, we were walking to go take a picture in front of the opera house like everybody does. And this guy had a shack with like plywood. I
Mm,
mean, it was, but I was used to drinking gas station coffee,
yeah.
and I ordered a coffee, and I couldn't believe how
Mm,
amazing the coffee was. And so I said, I got to go back and talk to this guy.
mm,
And because my kids drank instant, I was so like, I had this bubble in my head that yeah, we're going overseas, we're gonna have great coffee, and then my kids
mm,
drink instant, and I'm like, bubble deflated. And
mm,
so, and I didn't know enough of the area when we first got there for the first week or so to know any better to go look for coffee. But when we went to Sydney for the weekend, and I started asking that guy, he was probably thinking these stupid Americans don't know nothing about it, anything. And he's like, I don't do anything special. I buy there's 10 roasters in Sydney. They
mm.
all roast on Wednesday. I buy my coffee on Thursday. I buy enough for the week, and I don't grind it till you order. That's my big secret.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, exactly. Freshly roasted and freshly ground makes all the difference. I don't know a
It
lot
really.
about Australian coffee, but Papua New Guinea coffee is real popular. I've been back in town for a while, if, a couple weeks, and gone to some of my favorite coffee shops, and they all have a Papua New Guinea offering lately.
I have bought some, and it was good coffee. Um, I I'm so stuck on Ashley's coffee. Like I said, I'm going to send you
Yeah.
some greens so you can check it out. But
Yeah.
um, And of course, it doesn't hurt any that we went down and saw exactly
Right.
how they harvested, and the ladies hand select the defects out of it.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of labor that goes into that kind of
Yeah.
coffee before you get it.
Right.
And I think they just won fourth place, um, which is really big for an outsider down
Hmm.
there at a local competition. Uh, and I think their coffee ended up cupping 87.5.
Well,
And so it was a really, really high score coffee. And we've always had 85 score coffee from Ashley. And
nice.
I kind of feel bad about, offering pumpkin spice and all that other stuff because I'm putting that on specialty coffee.
Yeah.
And so, but again, that's one of those things where I think you really have to indoctrinate people so they
Yeah.
understand the difference. But people from Europe, I think they probably don't have any trouble knowing good coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. We sell more than I would have expected. Straight espresso and more cappuccino because that's what they do. And I've been surprised we have not sold a lot of lattes. Um, we sell ice lattes and we've started to sell a lot of cold brew. But I'm a mocha drinker and we don't really sell a lot of lattes. We sell either, yeah, yeah, a lot of ice drinks or espresso or cappuccino
Yeah,
and some drip. But for a long time, I didn't know if our drip machine I bought was going to be worth the investment because that's not something that Europeans drink at all.
right.
Yeah.
We got a machine that is it fills up the big um, carafats or whatever you call them,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the 1 gallon
AirPod or carafe or yeah,
AirPods. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and when I got the manual for it, um, so the one I have does two AirPods at one time every four
Mhm.
minutes.
Yeah.
Um, it can roast. I mean, it can drip that much, but it's more like a pour over machine.
Hmm.
The way because it gets the coffee up to 200 degrees. It won't start unless the water's at 200 degrees,
Hmm.
uh, which is one of the biggest things that I had to learn. Trying to tell people what the difference is between pour over and using an automatic drip or the pod machine. I'm not going to say their
Yeah.
name, but
Yeah.
um, the pod machine everybody uses is the water doesn't get hot enough.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
the pods, even though we're kind of testing them for 90 days or maybe 120 days to see how they go, but it's a convenience, and some people are willing to pay for that convenience.
Yeah.
But you can't, like, I can't possibly put enough dark roast in one of those pods to make it taste like dark roast.
Because it doesn't get
And
hot enough.
well, you just can't put enough grounds in it,
Oh yeah.
to make it taste like it would if you made a pour over
Yeah.
or if you
Yeah.
pulled a shot.
Yeah.
And so, um, I think those are probably, for me personally, those are things that I look for. Like when we went out to look for that machine, we wanted to make sure that we had a machine that we could program
Mhm.
to mimic
Yeah.
the pour over conditions. And then
Yeah.
we played with it for weeks before we used it the first time to try to get the right amount of coffee, you
Yeah.
know, so that that entire gallon tasted just like a cup that you made with pour over.
Yeah. And some of those, ours will. We have a Curtis machine. There's different programs where it saturates the grounds before it starts and stuff like that to be even closer.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, we're at the 1 hour mark, and I just want to ask you for any last thoughts and anything that you'd like to share about your business or you want people to know.
You know, I would encourage people if they're thinking about it to give it a chance. For me, if nothing else, I have a nice office where it smells great and I get free coffee. And so, even if I'm not making a ton yet, I love being in the coffee shop. I always loved hanging out in coffee shops. Great Wi-Fi and great coffee are gonna be a recipe for success, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Even here, where we're at, you can easily drive 15 minutes to the next town, which is a very popular town, New Braunfels, or you can drive 30 minutes and you can be in San Antonio. Um, but that small, it's not really small, but it's the intimate feeling that you get when you can go to a coffee shop and sit down and you can pull the Wi-Fi up, or if
Yep.
you need to do some work or you're studying, you can take your
Hmm.
laptop with you. And then the coffee's got to be like, we have a shop here, and I love the owner. She's done really well. She survived COVID. They had to move. Uh, the food is phenomenal.
Hmm.
The coffee,
Yeah.
not so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you get the environment, you get the food, you get the
Yep.
Wi-Fi, the whole bit.
Yep.
But for me personally, I need the coffee to be on point too.
Yeah. Me too.
And so
Me too.
it's it's definitely uh, we're working towards it. I think we're gonna buy an ambulance, and we're gonna wrap it, and we're gonna call it an emergency caffeine vehicle.
Well, a coffee truck.
And yeah, it's gonna be a coffee truck.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're gonna convert it, and
Wow.
we're gonna have to get clever with using some of the storage for water tanks and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But we were in Kansas picking up coffee from Ashley a few months back, and there was a donut shop, and they had bought two ambulances, and they wrapped them, and they were emergency donut vehicles. And so I got the idea, and I was like, I need an emergency caffeine vehicle.
That's right.
And
That's right.
we could have like I've seen pictures, old pictures of it's a cartoon picture, but it's like from the 40s, and there's a glass IV, and it's coffee, and so it'll
There
be
you
like
go.
Doctor Arabica and Nurse Robusta,
There you
and
go.
but we definitely want to break into the retail market,
Yeah.
because our end goal is to definitely work towards where you're at. I mean, we want to have a brick and mortar,
Yeah.
um, and for us, being faith based, there's just so many opportunities. You can offer a place for people to do their Bible study weekly.
Yeah.
You can have music
That's
from
what we
local
do.
Christian artists. Really
Yeah, we play Christian music, and we have TVs with verses in Spanish. Yeah.
nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
Ashley's wife goes into the bodega where they work, and every morning on the blackboard she'll put verses in
Yeah.
Spanish for the ladies that come
Hmm.
in and work.
Awesome.
And so, yeah,
Yeah.
that's really incredible. Well, I appreciate your time. Um, I know I'm always busy. I'm sure you are too, and I appreciate you spending an hour with us. And it sounds like we're going to have to put the DR on our vacation list.
Yeah. Yeah. Las Terrenas. Look it up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time. If you'll just hang out for just a second, I'm going to close the show and I'll come right back to you.
All right.
Thanks again for your time. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Hey, folks, another great hour of God Country Coffee. Thanks for tuning in. Again, I apologize for the start of this thing. I hit live and then it said live and then it went away. But anyway, no big deal. We roll with the punches, and what a great story from Jeff and his family. And if you're ever in the DR, you can look at the show notes. I'm going to put it on. It'll go out tomorrow to all the podcast places, and so you can get the information for JoJo's Java House. And if you're ever down there, you know where to go get good coffee. All right. So until we see you again next week, treat each other the way God intended us to treat one another, with love, kindness, and respect. Until next week, God bless.